CK3 is a complicated game. This much I'm sure you already knew. I often get asked specific questions about specific situations like, what religion should I play to accomplish X, or what culture traditions would be good, or even stuff like, how do you do X in general? For those of you that don't know me from Twitch, I'm a tutor on the side, as well as a linguistics student. I tutor French, Spanish, and English, and I study psychology and applied linguistics. I'm saying all of this because I have a lot of experience with both teaching and learning. The questions I often receive are equivalent to, what is 1 plus 1, rather than the better question, how do I do addition? Rather than asking specific questions about individual playthroughs, I'm going to present my mindset when playing CK3, and how my mind works when playing. I've done quite a bit of introspection into my own playing, and I have a system that you can use to practice any given skill, as well as the steps to take to ensure productive practice. I present to you the 8-fold path of CK3. In an attempt to simplify the immense complexity of CK3, I will be dividing the game into 8 spokes on a wheel. Each of these spokes is a skill or a manner of play that contributes to success in the game. Success in the game will be defined as the ability to accomplish any given in-game goal, whether that be an achievement or sleeping with your sister. Before jumping into everything, I'm going to present you my qualifications as a CK3 player so as to assure you that I do in fact know what I'm talking about. I'm a CK3 veteran who has been playing CK2 since I was 13. I have played just over 1,000 hours of CK3 since it came out, and just about 2,000 documented hours in CK2. I create in-depth analysis videos for CK3 and know the game like the back of my hand. Most impressively, I achieved every achievement in the game before World Court came out in less than 24 hours using a strategy I came up with myself. I streamed this live in one sitting with no breaks, besides using the washroom and eating here and there, and I currently hold several world records for the game. I'm still the only person to have ever completed every achievement in the game in one sitting and under 24 hours. I made a video guide to that all achievement run that you can watch right now, which was aimed at the intermediate to high level player base. This guide is for the low level players and those looking to improve. With that, I hope you can trust me, and let's jump right into our first spoke, the economy. I'm beginning with the economy because it is the basis for just about any action in the game. Money makes the world go round, and it will certainly form the foundation of everything else in the game. Money lets you bribe agents for plots, raise larger armies, send bribes, raise amenities, and create artifacts. Without money, your men-at-arms will not reinforce, your counties will become corrupt, and your vassals will hate you. How does building a strong economy work? Well, it's not too dissimilar to real life. The best way to make money is to have money. When you have money, reinvest it into counties for more money. Manor houses, farms and fields, and other money-producing buildings ought to be your priority. As well, ensure your domain has maximum control at all times, since low control doesn't just reduce income directly, but also causes bad modifiers called corruption to pop up in your counties. These modifiers are quite nasty and can be caused by either being in debt or having low control. This is the most obvious way to make money, but what if you don't have money already? The fastest way to get more money is to increase your domain, or to raid if possible, and to reduce expenses. This is your loop. Obtain money by external means and reinvest that cash into your buildings. This is if you're feudal or clan. If you're tribe, then just raid. Never stop raiding. Raiding is so immensely cost effective that it destroys any sense of even needing an economy. You can ignore this spoke as a tribe. As a spoke on the wheel, the economy should at nearly all times be a concern for the player. There is no goal for which money will not be useful due to its multifaceted utility. To improve at managing your economy, consciously make efforts to gain money and increase your income. There are many tools to gain money, especially when using the stewardship focuses, including extorting subjects or demanding money for hooks. Examine your own character's skill set and find a way to use it. As an example, if you're a diplomatic character, you will have better relations with your vassals, meaning you can perhaps get away with some tyrannical imprisoning and ransoming. Over time and with experience, you will come to get an instinctual feeling for what to do. Wartime. Okay. Fighting wars is almost always the most direct way to gain an advantage over someone. A dynasty often lives and dies by its wars, so knowing how to war is important. As may be obvious, war and economy are closely intertwined, and before going to war, consider the economic costs. War is almost always a long-term benefit at a short-term cost, but it comes with the caveat that a lost war is extremely detrimental. Offensive war is costly in the short term due to the maintenance costs of the army and offensive war opinion penalties across the board. But to lose causes you to pay the defender an immense amount of money, scaled based on your gross income. All that being said, if you've decided that going to war will be beneficial, we have to look at how to win a war. The most important thing in terms of winning a war is the war goal. Some wars have obvious war goals and others do not. For example, a conquest or holy war's war goal is to occupy or prevent the occupation of the claimed land. When at war, you can identify the war goal by the dotted blue line on the game map. The war goal for many wars is obvious enough, but others not so much. You will learn them through experience, but try to pay attention to what the game tells you. When a county or a barony has a blue outline, that's your war goal. When you occupy the war goal, you get ticking war score, which goes up quite quickly. If you can control the war goal, wars will end quicker than you think. Remember that the stuff you have to occupy is in that blue outline, and the things you can siege are the fortified holdings, which are almost always castles. You can tell which holding is fortified by looking at the little model on the map. It has a wall around it, it's fortified. How about when two armies meet? How do we win battles? The most important part of a battle is the men-at-arms composition and the presence of knights. If your men-at-arms counter your opponents, and you have better knights, you will inflict heavy casualties even against a significantly numerically superior army. The second most important thing is terrain. If you know your enemy has horse archers, and you can't counter them with crossbows, then fight them in mountains. If you have a lot of cavalry units, find some plains to fight in. Thirdly is your commander. A good commander with the right martial score and commander traits can make a reasonable difference, but to be honest, unlike in CK2, commanders are not that important. Ultimately, a battle is mostly decided by terrain and men-at-arms. If you can win battles, and you can hold the war goal, you will eventually win all wars you're ever in. The last thing I'll mention about winning wars is the war score to be gained from capturing heirs or the ruler themselves. Characters can be captured by occupying the county where they are, usually the capital, or winning a battle against an army they're in. These things are RNG, but the chances improve based on lots of stats and stuff which you can find on the wiki, but general rule of thumb is that the lower prowess characters and lower intrigue characters are easier to capture, but the math is quite heavy in reality. To improve in war, spend time checking your opponent's men-at-arms and consider the terrain in which you want to fight them. If you have an opponent with a significant smaller army, you probably can win by pure numbers, but if you're on even ground or they're stronger than you, consider reshaping your men-at-arms to suit the enemies or leading armies into bad terrain for them where you can beat them easily. Taking the time to check your opponent's compositions will quickly become instinct for you. Succession. Okay, this is a very important one. Death is inevitable. That is, barring the immortal trait, of course, but given that you likely won't have that trait, let's talk about how to handle the process by which your heir will take over rulership after you're gone. Succession. Succession is an ever-present issue to all CK3 players, and the system is much simpler and much less scary than what it may appear. Let's talk about how to become better at succession planning, and how to get better at improvising when succession suddenly happens. The first thing to do in any scenario is to check what your succession laws are. Since the vast majority of the game will have you living with partition succession, and the vast majority of players only play the first 200 to 300 years, I'll focus heavily on how to deal with partition. Primogenitor and ultimogenitor succession is generally going to not be too tough to handle. There are a few general goals you have for succession. 1. Ensure your heir is competent. 2. Ensure no titles are lost, or that those lost titles can be reclaimed with minimal effort, or you don't care about them if you lose them. 3. Neutralize vassal power whenever possible. And 4. Have a treasury of gold ready for your heir. These things are all ideals. Reality is that succession is ugly. Oftentimes, at least one of these things will unavoidably go wrong. Pulling off an ideal succession is quite possible, however, for smaller realms. With those 4 goals in mind, let's talk about how to deal with it when those goals can't be met. An incompetent heir is extremely difficult to handle, and to be honest, ought to be abandoned. Consider checking who your heir's heir is, and think about perhaps preemptively triggering a succession if the next character is superior. You can do this by attempting to imprison a vassal and failing. You'll be in a tyranny war, which you can surrender to and immediately be deposed. This will cost you some crown authority, but quite honestly, who cares? Crown authority is never as important as your character, and is easily changeable. If the next character is even worse than your current one, you'll have to weather the storm of a bad character. Try to at least find a competent spouse that can boost your stats where possible. You may deal with rebellions or a subpar domain limit or vulnerability to schemes, in which case you have to exercise your skills in other spokes of the wheel. Rule of thumb, the more competent your character, the less competent you have to be, and vice versa. If you're going to lose titles in succession, this is likely because you have multiple children who will inherit land from you, or you have some electors that are not agreeing on who should be heir. For elections, it's quite simple. Bribes, hooks, assassinations, or just getting rid of elections will be your way out. Multiple children are more complex though. First off, decide which kid you want to be the one. You want to choose a competent and fairly young kid with good traits and good genetics. Then you have a few avenues. You can try to get your other kids killed, appease them with land grants, or disinherit them entirely. Getting your kids killed is possible with a few routes. You can put them in armies and throw them against impossible odds, which works especially well for brave kids. You can throw them in a dungeon and just wait. You can always murder them if you're sadistic too. You'll find all kinds of ways to get your kids killed if need be. Appeasing them will work too. If your kid is entitled to land, you can grant them the land equivalent to what they're demanding to make them go away. This will usually be a duchy or a kingdom tier title, depending on if you're a king or a duke. Kids always are entitled to a title of equivalent rank to you, and if you don't have one, then a title of one step lower plus your domain will have to do. We never want to lose domain if we can avoid it, since domain is the source of our income. It can be quite valid, therefore, to invade a neighbor and just grant titles to your kids that you take from others. Just keep in mind that if you have 2 kingdom titles and 2 kids, you can give the second kid 100 duchies, and they will always want the other kingdom title. Appeasement titles must be of equivalent rank if you have extras to give out. Another thing you can do is allow yourself to lose titles but be set up to get them back easily. Remember that all kids get claims on all titles their parents had before death, unless the titles that they had become their own or their vassals' titles. That's why when a succession happens, your primary heir doesn't get claims on the stuff they lose to their vassal siblings. If your sibling inherits a kingdom and you're a king, you get to keep your claims to the kingdom because they'll be independent and not your vassal. The primary heir also keeps the men-at-arms and the money, and therefore all the power basically. The day your succession happens, declare war on your siblings and take those lost titles back. You'll inevitably win because you have the army money to do it. You could even just allow the titles to go if you don't need them. Some kingdoms aren't worth keeping if the vassals in that kingdom are a pain, or they're heretics, or they're foreigners, and they just cause problems. Consider if you even want that land before ensuring you keep it. Finally, there's disinheritance, which is the simplest route, of course. Just click the disinherit button at the cost of prestige and renown. Sometimes those resources are available, other times not. If your faith has monasticism, you can also make them take the vows. Remember that when imprisoning someone, you can negotiate their release with them taking the vows, and they'll always say yes. This costs piety, so if you have it, go for it. And don't forget that any children who refuse to take the vows, just throw them in prison and make them do it. Neutralizing vassal power can be odious at times, but most often involves creating alliances via marriage, or placing problem vassals under other vassals. Submerging vassals is a particularly powerful tactic for empire tier realms. A powerful vassal needs to be pacified with an alliance, if possible, or even just a good enough bribe to get them loyal. Once they're seemingly loyal to you, consider plotting against them to make them weaker in the future, so that you can revoke titles later, or just try to get a hook on them, and perhaps even educate their kids to be less ambitious and more cowardly, and then kill that ruler, putting the new docile character on the vassal's throne. If all else fails though, be ready to fight a civil war or two, or use some tyranny. Be ready perhaps even to give up your throne, if need be, and plot to get it back. Remember that any title you lose is only truly lost once your claim is gone. If a faction dethrones you, you still maintain your domain, your claim, and your alliances, something which the new ruler may be lacking. You may even be able to reclaim the kingdom or empire immediately after losing it. Lastly, if you cannot maintain a strong treasury, that can definitely suck, but one thing to remember is that on succession, all debts are forgiven. Unlike American student loan debt, your debts to the realm go away on death. Sorry, as a Canadian student, I had to flex that our student loans are so crippling. You can actually use succession to get rid of a massive debt problem if need be, but optimally you should have a lot of money for your heir to use for bribes, mercenaries, and wars they might need if other succession goals were not met. My last thought about succession is that elective succession is bad. No matter who tells you that elective succession is a good way to keep your realm together, outside of roleplay reasons, elections only serve to sap power from your family and to wrest control over the throne from you. Allow me to explain. Ask yourself why you are placing an election into your title. If it's a reason based in fear of your vassals, then all you're doing is giving in to the unmade demands of your vassals. You may think that you can convince your vassals to always let your family stay in power, but one bad election, and suddenly you'll have lost your throne, with a popular noble taking your spot. Managing succession using the techniques I've outlined will allow you more control and more power over your vassals by reducing the sway they have in the realm. Under an elective succession, even the most irrelevant of vassals has power, whereas previously they would not. Elections give out power like candy and are antithetical to a strong dynastic lineage. Do not use elections if you can avoid it. Well, that was a long-winded explanation of how succession could go wrong, and the reason why it's so long-winded is because succession is extremely important. Preparation for succession is quite honestly the main form of gameplay in CK3, and it could be argued that just about everything you do in the game is to ensure a smooth transition between ruler and heir. Overall, succession can be managed in many ways, and is something of an amalgamation of all sorts of skills in the game. If you want to get better at succession management, spend time analyzing your realm's vassals and the way things will change with your new heir. The things which you're good at may be the weaknesses of your heir, or vice versa. If your heir is low in martial and your ruler is high in martial, Try to patch up the problems you can predictably know will come if you had 0 martial. Try to imagine if your realm would still be together if a character with worse stats were on the throne, and in particular, the stats and traits your heir has. As well, practice deciding when it may not be worth fighting a civil war for the throne. A throne is only truly gone once your claim runs out, and a 10-year civil war that takes all your money will not be beneficial over 20 years off the throne while you scheme your way back to the top. Internal relations. This one is extremely important for the long-term health of your realm. Your throne is only as strong as the backs of those people who support it, going all the way down the feudal hierarchy. In many ways, the opinions and power of your realm's vassals matter more than those of the rulers outside of your realm. Maintaining relations can be complicated, but ultimately boils down to power. If you have power over a vassal, whether that's militarily, economically, or personally, then that vassal is a support in your pyramid. If you do not have power over them, they are at best a liability and at worst a traitor. The different forms of power you can exert over someone can suit certain vassals better than others. Being militarily more powerful than a 30 martial vassal is difficult unless they have next to no domain. But if that 30 martial vassal has 2 intrigue, you can easily get a hook on them. If they have traits like gregarious or trusting, why not just genuinely make friends with them? Sometimes, a genuine friend is worth far more than a cowed subject. Figuring out ways to keep your vassals in check will be up to you. A strong hook, a few secrets, military might, hostages, or shared culture and faith can create a pacified vassal. Taking the time to analyze the strengths and weaknesses of the vassals in your realm is an effective strategy for sure, but at the end of the day, your most common way of preventing outright rebellion will always be to have a strong army and a strong economy which can support that army. Keep in mind as well that personal advantages are between people and people die. Your 30 martial vassal may love your ruler, but once either of you die, that relationship between heirs may entirely sour. This is why realm advantages are genuinely better. Ensure that you have a large, well-upgraded domain while your vassals struggle to maintain their things. When handing out titles, a large number of small vassals is almost always preferable to a few large vassals. Large vassals ought to have other large vassals underneath them, which keep them on their toes where possible. A duke with 2 domain and 3 vassals of 1 domain apiece will almost never have the resources to fight against a 6 domain king. If all else fails, get an alliance via marriage with your powerful vassals. The only problem with giving out alliances is that you're also giving out claims. So you're somewhat shooting yourself in the foot for the future for this strategy, but a shot in the foot can be better than a shot in the head, so don't discount it. Another important note is that all vassals should have their de jure lands in their realm to prevent heavy opinion penalties, and that claimants to titles you own will almost always be problems. If a vassal below you has a claim on you, pacifying them may be nearly impossible without giving up that title. Giving up a title at times may even be the right choice, especially if other vassals in the realm support that claim. A massive civil war is never worth it unless that title is worth the economic cost of war. That being said, the civil war you know you can win at a cost you know you can afford is always worth taking on. The chance to imprison every single one of your rebellious vassals will set you up for stability for decades potentially. You can legally revoke titles, ransom for hordes of cash, and even just keep your enemies locked away where they can't hurt you. Even though this section is about internal relations, it can be better at times to break all relations and give those traitors a taste of your military might. Lower on the pyramid than your vassals are the people you rule over. Maintaining religious homogeneity whenever possible is good, although a pluralist faith with just tolerant cultures could get away with not caring about religion. When it comes to culture, the new culture features added to the game with Royal Court have made it such that becoming culturally tolerant is almost always superior to culture conversion, with the exception of cultures that are easier to eradicate than tolerate. Especially with the Royal Court DLC's hybrid culture mechanics, whether you have a DLC or not, cultural acceptance is powerful for ensuring the locals, both noble and lowborn, remain on your side. When it comes to civil war with lowborns, they are always worth doing, bar none. If there are populists looking to separate that claim to have 150% military power over you, this is genuinely untrue in reality. Populists and peasants do not have men-at-arms ever. Therefore, their numbers are hugely inflated, and their actual ability to fight a noble army is limited. Some populist factions may have nobility supporting them, in which case the numbers may be more real, but go ahead and check how much of that military power is from an actually threatening noble army, and how much of just a bunch of peasants with pitchforks. You could genuinely defeat an army double your size if it's a peasant army and you have good men-at-arms and commanders. If you want to be better at internal relations, take the time to find your vassals' weaknesses and exploit them. Look at your ruler's strengths and use those. Consider when a civil war would be beneficial or not, and decide if a protracted civil war would be beneficial. Remember to check vassal traits and check vassal power in all ways, not just militarily. A scheming vassal may appear fine up until the moment they're holding your infidelity to your wife over you. Heir Management. Similar to Succession, Heir Management is all about taking care of your kids. Crusader Kings is a game about dynasty at the end of the day, so managing the upbringing of your heirs is highly important. Ensuring a competent ruler takes the throne, and one supported by the powerful vassals of the realm, or at least one strong enough to not have to care about vassal support, is central to the game. This section won't be very long, if only because heir management is relatively simple, despite its importance. Having an heir with good stats matters, but at the end of the day, traits can often be even more important. Having traits that line up well with the desired aptitude for your character is important. Letting go of the idea that your heir can be good at everything is important. A character with 8 in all stats is much less valuable than a character with 20 in one stat and 4 in everything else, although aiming as high as possible is of course good. If your heir is aiming for a diplomacy education, don't give them shy or deceitful. Likewise, an intrigue-focused character should not have honest or trusting. Some traits are always good, like ambitious and diligent, although the immense amount of stress those traits can cause is a bit much, so be careful. Choosing an educator has a lot of math behind it, which you can find on the wiki, but at the end of the day, if I'm being honest, just educate your kids yourself. This way you can manage their traits well and keep an eye on them, as well as personally benefit from guardian events. Only when your character is a complete dunce should you get an external guardian. If you're playing as a child and need a guardian, try to look for good traits, high learning, and a particular focus on quick, intelligent, or genius characters, and then someone with a high stat in the education looking to get. Overall, to get better at heir management, focus in on the fact that an heir should be specialized. Much like real parenting, do not place the expectation on your child that they be good at everything. Foster and encourage the things they are good at instead. Marriage. Well, choosing a wife or husband is extremely important in real life, and it's also very important in the game. Choosing a wife or husband for your ruler and your family members is one of the most important parts of long-term growth for your family in a very literal sense. The choice may come from a few different motivations: claims, genetics, stats, fertility, or alliances, among others. Other motivations generally fall to the wayside unless you're looking for a particular thing. For example, I may look for a high stewardship spouse if my character is over the domain limit. This way I can use my spouse's skill to help out. Besides that, look at the weaknesses your realm has, and patch that with a spouse. If your military is weak, consider acquiring a strong alliance through marriage to supplement your army. If your family is small and needs land to add to the family, get some claims. If you feel the need to buff up your lineage's stats, get some good genetics. Essentially, find the problems and answer them with the appropriate marriage if marriage can be an answer. The marriage section is short because although it's important, it's ultimately the sort of thing you look at briefly and then move on from. It's not an ever-present thought like internal relations or succession can be. To become better at choosing marriages, understand what holes a marriage can fill, and how to identify marriages that suit those holes. Marriages are best used for long-term stat gain via genetics, short-term stat gain via the spouse's stat increase, military support, or for claims. Scheming is a weird one because this is like the most well-known part of CK3, but it's actually one of the less important parts. You can definitely play the game without ever scheming, because while not every character will be interested in lurking in the shadows, some may find it a good solution to problems where indirect action works better. The most ubiquitous scheme is the murder scheme, which any character can engage in. Removing a problematic character from the game can be great, but knowing who to kill, when, and in what situation is important. The downsides to a botched murder can be pretty awful for your diplomatic standing and your economy. The cost of bribing agents can be as expensive as a war itself, so if you're looking to avoid a war via scheming, consider the financial burden you're taking on through a scheme. If you're caught murdering someone, that character will now have -15 opinion with all characters in the world. You have effectively -100 opinion with the attempted murdered character's family, and if you're truly unlucky, then your target may not even be dead. Schemes are only effective when the outcome for them has an express purpose. Some people see a rebellious vassal and think, I'll assassinate them, and often neglect to understand what purpose that has. They just think that a dead vassal will go away forever, but ultimately, most vassals rebel out of systemic issues, not personal ones. The exception is if a vassal is your rival, then you might want to just kill them. Just keep in mind that if you're caught, their heir probably won't like you much and may even become your rival as well. If the vassal has no heir, and you're the heir by default, then that assassination is also probably worth it despite the systemic problems. As well, assassinating a claimant can end a civil war in its tracks if you can pull it off as well. This is why I'd recommend thinking to yourself what you're looking to see happen when the assassination goes through. Mindless killing is as effective as mindless rulership, that is to say that it's not effective. If a vassal is upset with you because they are missing their de jure land, killing them will not solve that upset, it may even make it worse. The same logic applies to all plots, whether abduction, claiming a throne, or fabricating hooks. A hook is only useful when you use it, otherwise you're wasting resources and risking ruining diplomatic relations. That being said, let's look at how plots can be useful, now that we've talked about how they can fail to be useful. We've discussed murders already, but how about abductions? One of my favorite ways to use abductions is to get a character with important claims into my family. Let's say a guy with a kingdom tier claim is stuck in a realm with a different faith to ours, so peaceful marriage is impossible. What you can do is kidnap him and negotiate his release by forcing him to join your court. Once he's in your court, you can force him into a matrilineal marriage with your daughter. With this technique, you've gotten all the benefits of a marriage for a claim without diplomatic cowing to a foreigner. Those two will have kids of your dynasty with claims to a foreign throne, and you can even put that guy on the throne with strong alliance between the two of you due to the marriage. Abduction can also be useful for wars. Capture the enemy's heir before declaring war for a free 50% war score right from the start. You can't declare war on someone in your prison, so capturing the ruler themselves is not useful. With that being said, capturing a king and ransoming him to drain his treasury can be a good strategy as well. Fabricating a hook is a powerful tool for any character, but particularly as a vassal. With a hook on your liege, you can change your feudal contract for free if you're feudal, and you can get your liege to do things for you. Particularly, getting a good marriage with your liege's family can be a great way to cement yourself in an alliance that will keep you safe, and to get claims on their family later. For the same reasons that you as the player may wish to avoid allying your vassals, you want to make alliances with your liege as a vassal. Hooks can be translated to cash with the appropriate perks, or used to expedite other schemes by bringing in previously unavailable agents. That being said, not all hooks need to be fabrications. Try finding secrets and blackmailing people using their spy master to get powerful hooks on people, or just reveal the secrets to ruin someone's diplomatic standing. It's all up to what you want. If you have a faction to overthrow your king, try finding out about his incestuous relationship with his mom, so as to make him a criminal in the minds of your fellow vassals who may now support your claim. Consider blackmailing a fellow vassal to support your claim to the throne so that you get the military power you need. Scheming can solve many problems, and figuring out what it can and can't do is important to becoming better at it. A hook cannot win you a war, it can only make war easier. At the end of the day, scheming is an avenue to support other strategies, not necessarily a strategy unto itself. To improve its scheming, come at every plot with a conscious and intentional goal in mind. Treat every plot like a mission, with a goal beyond just succeeding in the plot. You killed the guy, but did it give you what you wanted when he died? If not, why didn't it? Was what you were expecting reasonable? Ask these sorts of questions before plotting and while plotting, and you'll see improvements in your plotting attempts. Now we're getting to the final spoke on the wheel, and this one to me is the most important of all spokes: role-playing. The funny thing about the role-playing spoke is that it won't make you better at the game, and it won't make the game any easier to get through, but it still stands as the most important thing you can do for yourself in a game of CK3. I say this because CK3, once you're good at it, gets stale, as all games do. But this game, if treated right, can be a source of infinite fun. I want to clarify that role-playing does not necessarily mean playing the game according to your character's traits, or intentionally handicapping yourself to make the game more interesting. Rather, this is about deciding to pursue the game in a particular way with a particular role in mind. An example of a role-playing game of CK3 I did relatively recently was where I played a French count who just romanced people, fought duels all day, and made a couple good marriages once in a while. I had the goal of acquiring power through truly French ideals, and accomplished that using my mastery of the game. I did not limit my actions to vague justifications based on my traits, nor with strict rules about what I can or can't do, but rather played the game with a particular goal in mind. I even did a playthrough with the goal of creating a Brazilian analog culture and faith, which I called the Brozilian campaign. To this day, it was a fan favorite on stream. I stacked up as many modifiers to my culture and faith as I could, such that every feast I held would generate upwards of 700 prestige and hundreds of piety. I was also able to host one every 2.5 years, and I had the economy to support it. Again, I did not hinder my ability to play with a needless adherence to arbitrary rules, but rather a goal-oriented playthrough where I exercised my game skill to make something unique and personal. Role-playing is the ultimate way to have fun in CK3. At the end of the day, CK3 is a game of numbers and optimizations. You can play it however you want, but quite honestly, this game is not Europa Universalis or Hearts of Iron. The genetics are simple, the economy is simple, only succession could be argued to be complex, but even then, it's simple once you figure it out. What will keep you coming back to CK3 is its story generation, and the ability to do whatever you want. CK3 is a mechanically easy game, but does not take away from its complexity nor its enjoyment if you want to play the way it's intended to be played. Role-playing will come when you've mastered the other spokes of the eightfold path of CK3, and once you've mastered role-playing, you can enter CK3 Nirvana and finally transcend the confusion, lack of motivation, and frustration that comes to many neophyte players. To become a better role player, come at each game with a goal. Maybe that goal was a certain achievement on Steam, or maybe that goal was something short. But as long as you have a goal in mind, you can always find something to do. You can use your newly acquired skills to make it happen. The stories you form along the way and the wacky turns it all goes through will keep coming back for years. I've been playing CK2 since I was 13, and I've been playing CK3 since it came out. I don't think I'll ever give up on these games because of the role-playing. With luck, maybe you'll stick around all those years too. Thank you for watching. Leave any questions in the comments, or come ask me them live on Twitch, which you can find in the description down below. My massive EU4 analysis video is coming out in maybe 2 more weeks. It might take more time if I need to. And for now, I have a few more videos I want to put out about CK3, but stay tuned to my Discord for announcements about my stream and my YouTube. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.